So welcome to this latest video on 162 Maths, and in this video we're going over the GCSE Maths higher topic of direct and indirect proportion. Now before we work through some past exam questions and where you can access these questions by clicking the link in the description, I'll also go over what it is you actually need to revise, and from that I'll also include some links on the actual lessons that cover this topic in more detail. Now before we get started working through some past exam questions related to indirect and direct proportion, let's just have a quick overview over what it is you actually need to revise. Now in all of these aspects, if you're not sure about any of them, I will include links to lessons in which go through each of these things in more detail in the description below. So looking at the first thing, what it is you need to know is understand the difference between direct and indirect proportion. Now direct proportion is often when you are given an amount and you need to work out a higher amount. Indirect proportion is when you're given one amount but you need to work out a lower amount, but also the actual movement of the numbers. With direct proportion you tend to find that as X increases, the other increases. With indirect proportion, as one increases, the other decreases, and they're all going to vary at different rates. The next thing you have to do is be able to spot a direct and indirect question and understand the vocabulary, the translation and the notation. Now each of these things are really important to get started on these questions. Now in terms of spotting a indirect and direct proportion question, they will usually use the words of, so use the words proportion. They may also use varies or related to, etc. The next thing we then need to be able to do is the translation. Now this is where you start your question off. So if it says that X is directly proportional to Y, then you need to be able to translate that as X, and then we've got a proportional symbol to Y. This is what you need to make sure that you include this, as that is going to be generally your first mark in your solution. The next thing then comes about, like if I change that to squared, then that would be X is proportional to Y squared. And you also need to be able to look at and read the question carefully, because sometimes it might be the square of Y, in which then this would be a square root. So make sure that you have a bit of practice working through these questions and writing down that initial expression involving the proportion symbol before then replacing it with equals k, etc. The next thing that we need to know is to know the steps to find k and ultimately the equation. Now this is a really important step, and usually Y part A would be worth a lot more marks than part B, even though the questions may be written very similar, because you need to work out the equation first. You kind of need to take 3 steps back in order to take 5 steps forward. So again, practice working with these questions, working with the values that's given to find the equation. Then the most important part of this question, or the actual focal point of the question, is for you to use the formula to find other values, which again, very common with these particular questions once you've found the formula or the expression of the formula. The next thing which is slowly creeping up is to know how to spot a graph representing direct and indirect proportion. So again, a couple of questions are covered in this video in terms of on the topic test, in which we'll go through it when we do. But again, it's just recognizing the shapes. So once you've got the formula, let's say you had a formula of t equals, let's say 5x, then you should know that this line here is a linear equation. So that's going to be a diagonal going up. If I had x equals, let's say 3x squared, then I should expect a parabola, a positive parabola, and that's what the shape is going to give me. If I'm expecting a graph of 5 over x, then I know that that is going to be a reciprocal graph, which is going to look something like that. So make sure that you're able to know your graph shapes and be able to spot a graph shape when you're given the equation, and vice versa. So let's get started on some past exam questions. Now again, a little reminder that if you want access to these questions and have an attempt at before continuing watching this video, then all you need to do is just simply click on the link in the description, have a go at the questions, and then let's have a look to see if you were correct. So looking at question 1, it says the cost of 5 bread rolls is 80p. Find the cost of 9 bread rolls. So again, this could be classed as a direct proportion question, but again, if we think simple, it might be an easier way of doing it. So looking at this, we know that 5 bread rolls cost 80p. So then 5 equals 80p. So then 1 is going to equal 80 divided by 5, which is 16 pence. So then all we then need to do is do 9 times 16 pence, or 0.16 times 9, or 16 times 9. Any of those calculations where you're working in pounds or pence, but you should have an answer in pounds of £1.14. Then for question 2, it says it takes 6 men 4 days to build a wall. How long does it take 2 men? So for this, what we need to do is, just like we did with in the proportion video, is first of all work out the total time for the job. So for this, what we're looking at is going to be 6 times 4. So it's a 24-hour job. So then we've got 2 men. So then we then need to do 24 divided by 2, which gives us an answer of 12. Then moving on to question 3, it says here are 3 graphs, and it says match each graph to a car. So let's just have a look and zoom out, and let's have a look at what it's done. Oh, there we go. So if we just go back and then we just zoom in so we can see all 4 options. There we go. And it says, so here we're looking for a graph that shows steady speed. So this is where we're looking for constant gradient. Now the only graphs with constant gradient are graphs A and C. Now A represents the fact that nothing has moved because it's a constant distance. So then the answer then is going to be C. And nice little segue into the second one, which says shows a car that is not moving. Well, that's going to be A. And then just by process of elimination, that the last one is going to be B, which shows a car whose speed is gradually increasing, which, as you can see, it is, because as the time increases, so does the distance. Moving on to question 4, let's just zoom back in so we can see the questions on screen. Moving on to question 4, it says for any rectangle, area equals length times width. For when the area of a rectangle is doubled, the length is also doubled. What happens to the width? Circle your answer. But for this, if you're not too sure about what happens, then just make up an example. So let's say we had 2 and let's say we had 3. Now the original area for this is going to be 6. So then if I double the area, which then becomes 12, and I double the length, so that becomes 6, what do I have to multiply 6 to get 12? Well, that's going to be 2, and 2 was the original width, so actually it stays the same. For question 5, it says that y equals 10 over x squared for the values of x from 1 to 5. Which sketch is correct? Circle your answer. Well, again, if you're not sure, then just simply substitute numbers in and see which graph gives you the correct ordinate. So here we've got 10 divided by 1 squared, which is 10. 2 squared is 4, so that's going to be 2.5. 3 squared is 9, so that's going to be 10 over 9. That'll be 10 over 16 and 10 over 25. So again, which graph does that kind of resemble? Well, it's going to give me the graph of B. Because as x increases, y is going to decrease, but you can see that the difference between each of the y ordinates is different. It's just going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Then moving on to question 6, it says y equals k over x squared when x equals 4, y equals a half. Work out the value of y when x equals 2. So for this, what we need to do is substitute this into this to find k. So from this, what we've got is a half equals k over 16, which is x squared. Then if I do a bit of cross multiplying, I get 2k equals 16, so k equals 8. So then the formula is y equals 8 over x squared. So then using this formula, I can then work this out. So I've got y equals 8 over 2 squared, which is 8 over 4, which gives me an answer of 2. Moving on to question 7, it says the mass of a sphere m is directly proportional to r cubed, where r is the radius of the sphere in centimetres. When r equals 10, m equals 200, work out the mass of the sphere made from the same material with a radius of 15. So first things first, what I need to do is I need to translate this into the correct notation. So here m is directly proportional to r cubed. Then I replace the proportional symbol with equals k. And then what I then need to do is, using the given information, work out k. So here I've got 200 equals k times 10 cubed. So k is going to equal 200 divided by 1000, which is 0.2. So from this I can then work out the formula. So m equals 0.2 r cubed. Then using this formula and knowing that r equals 15, m is going to equal 0.2 times 15 cubed. And if I type that all into my calculator, I get an answer of 675. Then moving on to question 8, it says the graph shows the relationship between t and r. And it says work out the value of t when r equals 4. So let's have a look at this. So we can see that the formula is at the top, which again can be quite a bit discrete. You may have missed that off. So here I've got t equals k r cubed. Now what I need to do is find two values, in which I've got the two values from the graph. So when r equals 2, t equals 12. So substituting those into the formula, I get 12 equals k times 2 cubed. So k equals 12 over 8, which gives me 3 over 2, which is 1.5. So that means then the formula is t equals 1.5 times r cubed. Then if I substitute r equals 4 into it, t equals 1.5 times 4 cubed. Type that into my calculator, I get an answer of 96. Then for B, it says work out the value of r when t equals 32. Give your answer to 3 sig fig. So here, using this formula of t equals 1.5 r cubed, I know t is 32, so I've got 32 1.5 r cubed. So r cubed equals 32 over 1.5. So then r is going to equal the cube root of 32 over 1.5. So then if I get my calculator, which I'll do now. And again, to remember, cube root is not 3 root. You need to use the shift root and it comes up with a cube root, and then enter your fraction. So it's 32 over 1.5, press equals, and it gives me an answer to 3 significant figures of 2.77. Moving on to question 9, it says that it is known that y is directly proportional to x squared. Complete the table below. So using this, what we need to do is then write down the notation. So y is proportional to x squared. Replace the proportional symbol with equals k, and then use two known values. So I'm going to use this. So I know that when x equals 4, y equals 28. I don't know what I'm trying to write there, but there we go. So here I've got 28 equals k times 4 squared. So k equals 28 over 16. And that is 7 over 4. So then the formula is going to be y equals 7 over 4 times x squared. Now just make sure that your x's does stand out from that other x. So then working out the other values. So let's start by working this one out here. And let's use screen. So here I've got when x is 2, I'm going to have y equals 7 over 4 times 2 squared. Enter that on the calculator and I get an answer of 7. Then for this number here, I get when y equals 112. So 112 equals 7 over 4 times x squared. So then x squared equals 112 divided by 7 over 4, and x squared equals 64. So therefore x is going to equal 8. Then moving on to question 10, it says that ticket sales for a concert go online on a website at 9 AM. There are 2,400 tickets for sale. The number of tickets sold is directly proportional to the number in seconds from 9 AM. When Julia logs on, there are 550 tickets have been sold. The tickets are sold out at 9:08 a.m. Work out the time that Julia logged onto the website. Now, for this, what we know is that T is proportional to the number of seconds that was sold. So then from this, we can then write this as T equals KS. Now, if I just put a little box around that to begin with. Now, to get an understanding about what this is, let's just draw a graph. Now, this is the ticket sales. Which we've represented in T, and this represents time, and that's in seconds. Now, we know that we're starting off when T is 0, S is 0, we know that we've got 2,400 tickets. And we know that the tickets went after 8 minutes, which is 480 seconds. The tickets are sold out. We have no tickets. So we know that it's going to be a straight line graph from there to there. So now what we need to do, so in terms of the coordinates, so we know that when S equals 0, T equals 240, and we know that when S is 480, that T equals 0. So from this, what we can then do is work out what K is. Now K is also the gradient of this red line. So again, to work out the gradient using the graph, I've got 2,400 as the height and 480 as the base. So that means that K is going to be 2,400 divided by 480, which gives me an answer of 5. So that means that the formula is going to be T equals minus 5, because it's going to be, the gradient is going down, and that's going to be S. So here is our formula. Now in this formula it says that when Julia logged on, there were 550 tickets had been sold. So in terms of that, how many tickets have been left? Well, from that, what we then need to do is 550 equals minus 5S. So then if I do some division, we then work out that S is going to equal 110 seconds, which is 1 minute and 50 seconds. So then all I need to do is add that to the start time of 9. So the answer then is going to be 9:01 and 50 seconds. Now the mark scheme does allow you to say 9:02 if you did round it up to the nearest minute. Then moving on to question 11, it says that the time T taken for the journey is a fixed distance is inversely proportional to the average speed. When S equals S1 and T equals T1 on another journey, the speed of S1 is increased by 40%. Work out the time taken for this journey. So for this, we know that when we're increasing by 40%, that we're going to be generally multiplying by 1.4. Now, because we are inversely proportional, so here we've got T equals the inverse of 1 over S. Now, for this, because I want to represent a 40% increase, then here, what I've then got, if I just take and insert K in this, then what I've then got is that K has got to be the reciprocal of 1.4. which if I then translate into a fraction then becomes 1 over 7 over 5, which then becomes 5 over 7. So then from this, what we then got is T equals, and it's going to be 5 over 7S, and there is my formula for this particular question.